very warm welcome to Gaming News Weekly, your weekly gaming news show every Friday at 5 p.m. UK time. With your host, as always, I'm Rich, and my good friend and gaming padre, Tabs. Say hello, mate.
Hello, mate.
So, it's sort of a quiet news week in terms of how many juicy stories, but there's one that we cannot not discuss on the news story, which is obviously Elden Ring, so we'll get into that shortly, as well as two other stories, and then after that we'll have everything else. But before we do that, we will do, as we always do every single week, we will talk about what we've been playing, and I don't think there'll be any surprises of what we've been playing. So Tabs, what have you been playing?
Got a gag there, mate, during the intro, but I was pretending to play as you spoke. Got the old DualSense in hand. So yeah, Horizon Forbidden West.
Nice.
I think we've both been, trying to smash it as much as possible in between life. But I said to you, didn't I, last week, we were slightly different camps, tribes, because I was like, I was a little bit disappointed after seeing some of the reviews. Wasn't quite the response I wanted. I kind of wanted the Elden Ring response we've seen, but we'll get on to that. So I suppose I came in a little bit downbeat to it, but I'm really enjoying it. It's such a fab game. You can just, it stinks of money. It stinks of like how much creativity, ingenuity, talent has been poured into it. And it's colossal as well. And they have improved so much about the first game. So, yeah, while there's still elements of it which I think could still be improved on another Horizon game, there's no shadow of doubt in my mind that it's fantastic and I'm enjoying it and I'll continue to enjoy it. But we need to get through it, don't we, mate? That's the problem. What about your experience, bud?
I'm really enjoying playing it. It does have a feeling for me of Breath of the Wild in terms of the exploration and how compelled I feel to play it in terms of experiencing the world and stuff. I think they've done a really good job in the game. I think it's brilliant. I do think I didn't play huge amounts of the first game, but I do think it's a good step on the first game. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. Yeah, just really enjoying it, getting into it. Starting to get into the story more now, which is starting to get really interesting and a little bit quirky. So we won't talk about that. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying it. So, but like,
what do you think of the mini game? By the way, we talked a little bit about it during the week. But
yeah, I liked it, mate. I think I said to you, it feels a little bit like the Inscription card game in some respects. In terms of the way in which you're battling, your pieces have hearts or lives, if you like, and have an attack power, and you're trying to defeat the other enemies. I like it, mate. I've only played one round of it because I'm like, I want to play that, but I also want to get into the game. So what about you? Because I know you were like, I do prefer Gwent.
Yeah, Gwent from The Witcher. It just doesn't quite yet. It may develop, but doesn't quite have that addictive nature that some of the other kind of, I remember like Blitzball in FF10 and Gwent. It just doesn't quite have that bite that some of those games have. It's quite cool. And also, I don't know about you, but I've not really got many other kind of figurines, because that's part of, like in Gwent in The Witcher, you're collecting cards, you're building your deck essentially throughout the game. And I feel like that element as well, it doesn't feel like I've got this massive library of unique statue, figurines for that game. It's basically, it's a bit like, it's almost a bit chessy, isn't it, as well, mate, in the way it's set up.
I'd say it's a mixture of chess and, like I say, the card game from Inscription. But I have actually managed to get a few pieces. There's a person that sells pieces near-ish to the first area you're in.
Is there? Sells them?
Yeah.
Right.
I think I managed to get one of those, those rhino ones with the acid stuff on their back. I got one of those.
Oh, the blister thingies.
Yes, I can't think what they're called. You know what I mean, don't you? The big, almost like rhino-looking things. I managed to get one of those and something else as well, which escapes me at the moment. But yeah, so definitely worth checking that out, Tubbs.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and hopefully I'll be playing some more this evening. So I'm sure you will, Tubbs. Although I'm sure you're going to break off to play during we're doing this, aren't we? Trying to cram as much as we can.
I'm looking at the TV, yeah. No,
Right.
carry on, mate.
Absolutely. So, first news story this week, no real surprise, the Elden Ring review roundup. Now, with this, Elden Ring has basically gone off. It seems it's been so widely well received from what we've seen, we couldn't not do a little review roundup. So let's get into this. So currently sits on 97 on Metacritic.
Mental.
Which is insane. And I'll get into the first one. This comes from Game Rant, who gave it 100. Had this to say: however, when judged on its own merits, Elden Ring is a phenomenal game that will disappoint very few. It has the components that fans of the genre seek: a wondrous aesthetic, a feeling of mystery that invites exploration, skillfully designed and intimidating adversaries, and rich gameplay with a lot of replayability thanks to various classes and builds. In the end, Elden Ring is more than just an open world Dark Souls. It is strong in its own right, with tweaks to the classic Souls blueprint that create a refreshing new experience that still feels familiar.
Amazing. Press start, gave it a 95. This is what they had to say. While it feels like the impact of Breath of the Wild is waning as the open world genre starts to stagnate again, Elden Ring stands out as not only an achievement in From Software's Hall of Fame, but also as an open world RPG. Elden Ring is without a doubt FromSoft's most ambitious undertaking yet, and like Dark Souls before it, I believe it will leave a permanent mark on both the open world genre and the games industry in general.
Wow. PlayStation Lifestyle had this to say, and they gave it a 90. Elden Ring feels like the game From Software have been building up to ever since Demon's Souls released in 2009. A huge open world filled to the brim with challenging enemies, characters sporting obvious influence by George R.R. Martin, and the typical drip feed of lore. From Software is famous for crafting all combined to form an intoxicating adventure you won't soon forget. Yes, the formulaic nature of these games is absolutely showing that after 3 console generations, but as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And what's interesting here is, now everyone who watches the show normally knows that Tabs, he writes the blurb for this, and he always says at the start, I've taken a cross-section of reviews. And
I was going to say the same thing.
I'm absolutely sure that he will have taken a cross-section of reviews here as well, and the cross-section is 100 to 90. That's the cross-section. That's
absolutely
insane.
Right, mate. I couldn't find a review on Metacritic that was lower than 90 as things stand, which is just mental.
It is.
There's a load of reviews which also, we should point out, are still in progress, and that's owing to the fact that apparently it's not just a brilliant game, it's absolutely massive. Though, even though I think it can be completed in like the 30-40 hour range if you just smash and beeline the story, most people I think are like more between 60 and 80 hours just because of how much side content there is, and also I think just the pure sense of discovery and exploration. You get lost. But no,
yeah, I would say all of the reviews that I've heard about, as people saying I've done 84, I've done 89, I'm on 75. Lots of people are saying those sort of figures. I think the telling thing here, and the thing we should all be the most exciting about, was when Breath of the Wild came out, that really like shook the industry. Everyone was like, oh, okay, that's how you do an open world game. And it sort of stood at that place ever since. You know, the way you sort of naturally explored the world and found all of these things, and that's what kept you coming back again and again and again. And what it appears from what we're seeing now, me and Tabs, neither of us have played this game, but what it appears from the reviews we're seeing is From Software have taken that mantle of what an open world game should be, and they've ran with it and created sort of the next watershed moment for open world games in terms of exploration, the way that the story like unravels itself, all of these little things that you stumble across and you can interact with, the bosses. Everything that we're seeing and hearing from this game just sounds like it's another level, and the fact that it's being touted in the same breath as Breath of the Wild is in itself incredible.
Yeah, absolutely agree, mate. It's like Breath of the Wild had this design, didn't it, that you could go in any direction, basically. And although you would kind of come across hurdles, it just felt like you were, more so than ever with an open world game, the master of you weren't gated quite as viciously as you often find in games and older open world games. And it feels like they've taken this to another degree. Because in part due to the nature of, Soulsborne games, whatever you want to call them, because as we kind of text about during the week, there's a lot less tooling. It's much more, at your own discovery. And in some ways that can hold them back because like the story's hard to, what's the word? It's hard to follow. Navigation is difficult because you don't have the sort of like map and quest logs and whatever like say Horizon has. But at the same time, that just amps up the sense of discovery, the sense of agency and crafting your own adventure, your own experience. Add into that the density of this world we're hearing about, which was again another thing for me and you in Breath of the Wild, mate. It was beautiful. Like we could be ahead of either one of each other because you actually jumped on a lot later than I did, or buying a Switch a week or so later. But the beauty was, even though I was ahead of you, it wasn't about that because you were still finding out stuff in the world that I'd not even touched yet, just because of how big it was and how much there was to find. And it feels like that's exactly what Elden Ring has just taken with, like you say, and run for the hills. It's no knock on Horizon, but I think you can still see some of the, what should we say, kind of legacy design of open world games. Like, even though it's this big, beautiful, natural looking environment, you can kind of feel like this gamified wireframe over the top of it in the way it's designed, the way it's gated, as we say, the way it's balanced. And it feels like Elden Ring, from what we're hearing, is going to be a totally wild world to discover.
And it does sound like, from what we're hearing, that there's the exploration, there's ways of getting around things you might be stuck on that lead you further on into the game. I mean, it sounds like you could come to the last boss in the game and have seen the last boss in the game and have no possible chance of doing it because of the way in which you've navigated through the world. It sounds like it's literally a take it or leave it type. You might find things that, it's going to meander all through the world, and it just sounds incredible. I'm super, super excited to play this.
That's one of the biggest things, mate, that I'm most impressed with, because we were talking just before we started filming how we've been here before, so hopeful about what could be, as in your words, a watershed moment for the games industry. And we've been there with Cyberpunk, where it flopped. It didn't live up, it didn't deliver. And in fact, Elden Ring seems like it's over-delivered on the promise. And like what everybody's saying, just the sheer amount of content and density in this world seems mind-blowing. And also, nearly all the reviews I've seen, apart from the odd criticism about certain formulaic, there's highs and lows in the way it's designed and some of the content. Apparently, the way it rewards you for almost every bit of sidetrack that you get onto, it all feels really meaningful. It doesn't feel like dross busy work or whatever, or
absolutely.
And I think that's a spectacular achievement.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about busy work in games a lot, where they're like padding it out, like collect these and, all this, do these insane jumps and all these other things. And all they're doing is trying to add content very easily. It doesn't sound like there's any of that here. It sounds like it's so content rich. You spend 150 hours doing 150 hours worth of different things, not, 100 hours worth of things and 50 hours of the same thing in a different area. It sounds amazing. Really
and they all provide value to your character progression, which is part of what, Breath of the Wild, it made it so empowering, because as you work through it, you really were mastering this world, and you were, what's the word, mate? In incrementally, you were upgrading your character and, Link's capability in that world. And again, I think they've married so many so many brilliant things we've seen, and it's all come together to be much greater than the sum of its parts, which I think is always a good sign of a great game.
I mean, in some respects, it's a great shame that it's seemingly the masterpiece that it is, because it sort of takes a significant shine off of Horizon. It's come a week later in Horizon's in the world. You know, Horizon came out last Friday. This Friday, today, when you're watching this video, Elden Ring's out, and it's sort of taken the shine off Horizon. Like, nobody's talking about Horizon now. Everybody is talking about Elden Ring.
I do feel bad for that. I do feel bad because, you know, like we were saying before, mate, there's obviously so much effort and time has gone into Horizon, and we're loving it. But, you know, it just, I suppose it puts things in perspective. We were similar when Zero Dawn came out, and we felt similarly about Breath of the Wild. Like, I thought Zero Dawn was a great game, solid, but Breath of the Wild just had that kind of like meteoric impact.
Agreed. Like
you don't often get with games, unfortunately. It seems like Guerrilla and Horizon perhaps had that kind of overshadowment again, if you like. But anyway, we bought it, mate, so we're supporting them. Shouldn't feel too bad.
Absolutely. Right, shall we move on?
Yes, indeed. So Nintendo's turn to acquire is story number 2. This comes from VGC, BArcadians, and this is what they had to say. Nintendo has acquired its long-established development partner SRD Company Limited, or Co-Limited. SRD is a developer comprised of around 140 employees that, while technically independent before now, has worked exclusively on first-party Nintendo software for 40 years and operates close to Nintendo's Kyoto, Japan HQ. SRD was founded in 1979 and has worked on games as far back as the original Donkey Kong and contributed to virtually every major Nintendo franchise, including Mario, Zelda, and Animal Crossing. Most recently, the company worked on Game Builder Garage, Ring Fit Adventure, and 1-2 Switch. So not a massive news story, this, mate. But I thought it was just interesting to throw in, given the recent trend of acquisitions. And, you know, this is Nintendo doing acquisitions in its own way on obviously a much smaller scale. I mean, it sounds like they were basically a part of Nintendo anyway, doesn't it, from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nice to see, because I think I've said a couple of times that Nintendo sort of, in some respects, risk getting left behind. Now, I'm not saying that this is in any way suggesting that they're suddenly going to catch up, because as Tabs has just mentioned there, it sounds like they've bought a company that pretty much works for them anyway. So they were almost like a partner anyway. They're just going to be owned by Nintendo now. So it's good though. It's good to see them being progressive and having more studios coming on board. So yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah,
can't be argued with. Pretty much filler though, BArcadians, really. So mate, do you want to move us on to story number 3?
Absolutely. So COD delay, and this comes from GameSpot. 2023's Call of Duty game may be delayed to the following year. This would mark the first time since 2004 that a year would pass without a new mainline Call of Duty game, which has gotten new entries on an annual basis since 2005's Call of Duty 2. Bloomberg reports that Activision Blizzard will delay 2023's Call of Duty in hopes of further polishing the game. Seeing as Microsoft announced its intention to continue developing Activision's franchise for competing console platforms, that could mean we'll see the new Call of Duty launch for Xbox Series X, S, PS5 and PC. The report also says that Activision Blizzard is pushing this new Call of Duty's release following a recent game failing to meet expectations. No exact game is listed, but both Vanguard and Warzone underperformed in 2021 in comparison to Black Ops Cold War and Warzone in 2020. It's likely in reference to one of those. I mean, me and Tabs have spoke at length that releasing a game every single year in a franchise is not enough time to do justice to people going out and buying a £60, £70 game. Now, I realise I believe in the Call of Duty games franchise, there's 2 studios working on, and one works on one game while the other's working on the other game, and then they're obviously released in subsequent years, basically. So in theory, they're 2 years in the oven. But we look at all of these other games, you know, Elden Ring, all these other games that we look at, and they take years to do. They're not 2 years. So I realise these are different types of games, but I think this could be a really good thing. And I wonder whether this is Microsoft's influence in sort of pushing them to do better, to better themselves as a company and as a product. Tabs.
No, I feel exactly the same, mate. We see it with Pokemon, we see it with Call of Duty, we see it with, EA sports games for the most part. And it essentially amounts to churning of these franchises year on year, because they make a lot of money, they have a big audience. But I do feel like it's not only fatiguing for developers, it's fatiguing for gamers. It must be soul destroying to basically be making these, in some cases, very barely incremental upgrades and changes to tried and trusted formulas. And I just feel it must become meaningless to the people behind the scenes in time. I'm all for this sort of thing. And I think with the acquisition, it was probably no time was better because of, share prices, being rejigged or whatever once they get absorbed by Microsoft. It's a great thing. I hope they don't go back to this pattern though. I mean, they've not said they're going to leave this business model behind. It's just delayed because of lackluster performance of previous titles. So yeah, but it'd be lovely to see them hit back hard with a new Call of Duty in, was it 2024? I think really states the example. Let's take our time with games again and try and make them more meaningful.
I think there's two things there. Obviously, their financial position has been somewhat stabilised by the fact that they're being bought by Microsoft. So they know that they don't need to worry so much about their share prices and profits and loss because they're being taken over. So that's one thing. But also, I personally think that the reason why the games didn't sell so well is because the gaming in general, people who are playing games are fatigued by these games and the fact that they are so generic, they are so similar every year. I think that now is the time to do something fresh, take the time and bring something to the market that will re-energise people's opinions and thoughts on these kind of games.
I think they've kind of, they've shit on their own doorstep in a way, mate, because Warzone is of course this free-to-play experience now, battle royale sort of jobby. And it's free to play, and it kind of gives you most of what you want from a COD game. Not all, the standalone releases have unique attributes. But I think unless that new entry really stands out as I've really got to get this because it's got this, this, and this, they've really moved this genre on, like we're talking about with the likes of Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, then it just doesn't justify a 60, 70 quid price tag.
Agreed.
When you can just play Call of Duty Warzone and kind of tick that box, scratch that itch.
Agreed.
So 100% that it's a bit of a rethink. Hopefully, as I say, they'll come screaming out in 2024 with a new release. It will sell really well. It will be reviewed really well. And maybe that will send a message to everybody else in the industry. We've talked about Pokemon for years, that we want them to change their model. And fingers crossed it will cascade.
Absolutely. Right, should we finish this week's news with everything else? So this is...
Sorry, mate, I feel like I emergency stopped there at the end of that.
No, not at all, it's fine. No, not at all. So as always, we finish with everything else. Is everything that we couldn't fit in the news that wasn't worthy of a big juicy news story. So first up, we've got Xbox General Manager shoots down claims that Gears 5 dev is working on multiple unannounced projects.
The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is coming to Switch next week. Decent entry.
Absolutely. And finally this week, Skull and Bones development is going well. We've not heard a lot about that for a long time and is planned for a release window of fall 2022. So that's very interesting.
Have I heard, mate, they're going for a multiplayer. I even feel like it could be a free-to-play model.
Yeah,
but definitely multiplayer focused.
There's been rumours about that. I think we spoke about that a few weeks ago, didn't we, when the rumours sort of circulated, because there's been so quiet about this game. They've dropped that thing and it looked amazing, and then we've heard next to nothing since. So yeah, be interesting to see when we have more info on that, what comes from that. So, Barcadians, that's it for another week on the news. Big week. If you have got Elden Ring, I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope it's the masterpiece that we're led to believe that it is. We'll be waiting for a little bit because me and Tabs want to play it together, and obviously we're both deep into Horizon at the moment. If you're new here and you've liked what you've seen, please subscribe, hit that like button, and I think that's it. Another one for the archive.
Stamped and completed.